So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have a ton of things to go over. So welcome to my presentation on how I did it. And maybe you can get some ideas too. I don't know if you want to, but you can. I do want to warn you that this event is going to be recorded, and I am sorry, but no snacks will be provided for obvious reasons. So a couple of things as a reminder. I am not a doctor, and I don't even play one on TV. If you have pre-existing conditions, you should consult your doctor, but you do need to be aware that most doctors don't know anything about this and are likely to jump to certain conclusions. So take that information as it will. Also, keep in mind, this is my presentation. I'm not representing APT or any other organization while I'm talking about all of this. And I have about 2 hours of information to present in 1 hour, so I will be speaking quickly. I apologize. I will make the PowerPoint available to whomever would like it. So you want to know how I did it? Well, there's one hint that I want to give you before I go into the full regala, and that is that it had nothing to do with biking. A lot of people have been coming up to me and saying, oh, you must have been doing a lot of biking. No. But I will give you a little bit of background information first, with the acknowledgement that I am not a scientist, so I'm not able to give you scientific information very well. But we all know, what's the most important meal of the day?
Breakfast. The next one.
Yeah, the next one. I like that. Yeah, we're all told breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but is it? I want you to consider taking a look at an article that was in the New York Times by Gretchen Reynolds. She talked about studies that were done at the University of Birmingham and some other institutions where they recruited about 300 volunteers, all of whom were trying to lose weight. And then they were split into groups where they were either eating breakfast or not. And what they found is either way, no one really lost much, maybe a pound or so per person. And that was regardless of whether they skipped breakfast. Now, there's a little bit more to that. They took some, at University of Bath, they took some lean volunteers and checked their metabolic rates and their blood sugar and cholesterol. And then they told them to either skip breakfast or eat it. And they were given activity monitors. And again, what they found was things were roughly about the same at the beginning and at the end. What they found is that people who ate breakfast burned about 500 calories more, but they also consumed about 500 calories more than those who didn't. So again, generally they found that skipping breakfast did not cause overeating when it came to lunch or dinner, as you might expect if you were to skip lunch, that people would get hungrier. So where did this idea about breakfast being the most important meal of the day come from? You may be familiar with a 1890s healthy living fad that was started by the Seventh-day Adventists. They created these sanatoriums where they promoted bland foods and vegetarian diets for health purposes and also to try and keep people from masturbating. And from that, Kellogg's cereal was actually born. That they wanted as bland a cereal as they could, and that's what they came up with. And of course, they made it a big deal. But it took off a little bit from there. So the breakfast cereals had become popular at this point. And then there was a whole big PR thing that happened. This guy is Edward Bernays, also known as the Antichrist. And he had a campaign with the Beech Nut Company, where he decided to try and exploit all of this hoo-ha around breakfasts and healthy eating that were the big fad of the time. And he used that in order to help the Beech Nut Company push its bacon, which was his goal and his client. And what he did is he did not use Thomas the Tank Engine in his advertising, but he did create this perception train that still lingers to today. He was able to get a single doctor to sign off on an agreement that protein, heavy breakfasts of bacon and eggs were healthier than a light breakfast. And then he sent that statement from one doctor to 5,000 doctors and asked them to sign on to it. and then produced that to newspapers as though it was a scientific study. So 5,000 doctors said, that sounds like it could be true, and all of a sudden it's a scientific study. So let's talk for a moment about why we gain weight. I will tell you something, for those of you who've known me a long time, you've probably seen me go up and down in weight. One of those journeys was with Weight Watchers, and I no longer believe what they say, which is you gain weight because you eat more than you output. So you're eating more than you exercise. And I remember them saying this is fairly simple. Just don't eat as much and output more and you'll lose weight. And if that were true, this is what I would look like. For those of you who know me locally, you know that I have regularly bicycled 4 hours a day, 2 hours to get to work, 2 hours home. That's not always the case. That's just some routes that I take. And it did not make me look like this, oddly enough. So you may be saying, oh, good, so I don't have to exercise. Well, before we go there, you should keep in mind that aerobic and strength exercising really is super important. It's just not great for weight loss. And also keep in mind that sleep is super important as well. But let me get back to the food part, which is what we were here for. So before I get into how I did it, I'm almost there, I promise. I want to talk to you very briefly about how your body reacts to food. So one of the things that they did is they studied people with diabetes in the United States, and they realized that the number of people have increased threefold from just 1990 to 2010. And according to the American Journal of Nutrition, they studied 66,118 women over 14 years. And I just wanted to focus on one statistic, which is their drinking habits. They found that with both sugar and artificially sweetened beverages, it increased the risk of type 2 diabetes. And you wouldn't expect that because artificially sweetened beverages were created for people who were having diabetes problems and trying to avoid sugar. And this is where some of that information came from. Again, I can make this available to you, but I did want to cite the facts because I know we have a lot of scientists listening to this. A lot of people would say to me, but wait, I really have to have artificial sweetener in order to lose weight. I'd like you to consider taking a look at wellandgood.com, where they say that the taste of sweet, whether it's artificial or actual sugar, actually increases your appetite. And I found that to be the case for me as well. And in some large-scale studies over the past 30 years, they found that artificial sweetener drinker users gained more weight and had higher body mass index than those who did not use artificial sweeteners. All right, you ready to hear how I finally did it? Okay, fasting. Don't leave yet. Hang on. Before you go, I know a lot of you are thinking, wait, isn't fasting really unhealthy? Well, I'd like you to consider an article by Dr. Stephanie Estima called 7 Absurd Myths of Fasting. And just a couple of the points that she brings up in there in more detail that I'm going to go into now. Don't confuse fasting with starving. I'm not talking about a food hunger strike. It also, a lot of people think it causes muscle wasting. It does not. It also doesn't cause malnourishment or low blood sugar. But I know a lot of people will say, oh, yeah, but fasting, that's a great way to mess up your metabolism. You know what a much better way of messing up your metabolism is? Standard diets. In fact, one of the things that they did in Scientific American back in May of 2016 is they went to the contestants on The Biggest Loser and found that their metabolism was wrecked 6 years after the show. Their weight had come back on and their metabolism was slower than when they started. Also, if you take a look at another article in Healthline from November 2016, they found that intermittent fasting actually increases the fat burning hormones, which is what we depend on in order to lose weight. So the blah, 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 this is the scientific stuff that I'm not great at, but you should keep in mind that the reason that we have this problem is because there's an increase in the blood levels of hormone norepinephrine, which actually stimulates your metabolism and it instructs your fat cells to break down body fat. And studies reveal that if you fast up to 48 hours, you can actually boost your metabolism between 3.6% and 14%. And there was another study that showed that fasting every other day for 22 days did not lead to a reduction in metabolic rate, but there actually was a loss in fat mass. So I want to take just a few moments to talk about insulin and its role in weight. And really, when you come down to weight and weight loss, it's really all about the insulin. I saw an interesting article called "Obesity is Always and Everywhere an Insulin Phenomenon," which is a play on the Milton Friedman dictum that inflation is and always everywhere a monetary phenomenon. What you should keep in mind is that when insulin is too high for too much of the time, that makes people fat. End of story. I can make someone fat by just giving them insulin. A normal, thin person, I could get fat. Insulin is what tells your body that it needs to store fat, and it also stops your body from breaking down fat. And this is how it works. When you need energy, your body looks to your current reserves for quick energy. So this is basically what you've just eaten. This is your current meal. So when you need energy, it's going to look there. When you store energy, store it as fat. That is like having a freezer in your basement. And it's not quick access to energy. I apologize, the caption there is wrong. That is your long-term access to energy. And what controls this is the headmaster chef called insulin, who decides what food is going to go into short-term storage and what reserves are going to go into long-term storage. And then that chef works to protect the long-term storage so that it's available when needed. I wanted to spend just a moment talking about type 2 diabetes. In an article in WebMD from 2018, there were small studies. There were probably more that were larger, but this is what I was able to find for this, that talked about diabetes improvements. But beyond that, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. And one of the things that I really am fond of is a Facebook group that I belong to called the Obesity Code Network. And I'll be talking more about this later. But you'll see in there over and over and over again, people writing in talking about their type 2 diabetes, which they no longer have as a result of fasting. And I know a lot of people have said to me, yeah, I could never do that because when I don't eat, I get hangry. But there is actually a reason for that, which is that you're blaming the wrong thing. You're blaming the fasting where the real problem is carbs. Carbs actually purposely make you hungry, and fats make you more satiated. And to understand that, you need to understand that carbohydrates actually promote insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is when your body does not want to process insulin properly. So it starts doing the things like keeping things in storage beyond when it's supposed to, and messing up with your insulin rates. Carbs raise your insulin, and sugars impair the hormone ghrelin, which is the signal that tells your brain that it's time to stop eating. So if you eat a lot of carbs, you're likely to actually increase your appetite. Whereas fats have the value of releasing leptin, which is the satiation hormone. So it's the opposite of ghrelin. The problem with carbs, rather, where it stops ghrelin from telling you that it's time to finish eating, it tells you it's time to eat. So I know a lot of you are saying, wait a minute, now you want me to eat fats? Actually, yes, there are some good ones. And in case you can't see that, the little caption there says, oh, I said you are a good kind of fat. Avocados are a great kind of fat. So are bacon and eggs and cream and yogurt and nuts and fatty fish. I'm not saying you eat those exclusively, but those are good fats to eat. And keep in mind, when you buy something in the store that's called low fat, it often accomplishes that by increasing the carbohydrates. So try to sometime compare two things, one which has a low fat version, normal fat version, and look at the carbs, look at the sugars, and look at the fat, and you'll see one of the things that they usually do is increase the carbs in order to make it taste okay. So a lot of people say, aren't I going to get tired if I fast? And you might at first, but what you need to keep in mind, sorry? What you need to keep in mind is that this guy here did not get 3 square meals before he went hunting. And in fact, one of the things that they've noticed is that you go through a stage where you start getting fasting adapted, and it increases your energy level. And they believe that the reason for this is that your system wants to encourage you to actually go out on the hunt. So it wants to give you more energy for fasting purposes. There are a number of other benefits to fasting that I would like to talk about, and one of the most important is something called autophagy. If I could have one session just on autophagy alone. Autophagy was something discovered by Yoshinori Osumi, or actually not discovered, but discovered its role. He actually won the 2016 Nobel Prize in Physiology of Medicine. And what he discovered are the mechanisms that underlie autophagy, which is the process for degrading and recycling cellular components. And the short version of that is that it's your body's way of cleaning out cells that are damaged and regenerating newer, healthier cells. They used to think that that wasn't possible, but now they are realizing that it is. They did know that in 1960s, they knew that a cell could destroy its contents by enclosing it in membranes, and it forms this lysosome compartment. And in 1990s, Osumi used baker's yeast to try and recreate this, and he found out that the mechanisms for autophagy in yeast were similar to what happens in our own cells, which created a new paradigm of how the cells are recycled with its contents, and also gave light to a lot of the physiological processes involved, such as adaptation to starvation.
What are you doing here? When's you gonna be?
You might want to mute yourself.
Oh, is he doing any better? Oh, well, good to see you. Happy Friday, and we have a 3-day weekend.
So
Did I send out an email to remind everybody? Just in case, yeah. I did to the new people, but
Good morning,
old people
Yvonne.
don't remember.
there it is,
Yeah.
or not. There we go. Okay. So what does autophagy actually do? Well, it's kind of like the built-in fountain of youth. It's your body's way of turning back the clock and creating younger cells. And what they found is that when our cells are stressed, such as with fasting, autophagy increases to protect us, and that helps to expand our lifespan. So the things that are broken, it fixes. And a lot of this is removing toxins from the proteins of the cells. And one of the things that they've found is that this can actually impact Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. And it does this by recycling residual proteins and providing energy for repair of your cells. It also has been receiving a lot of attention. They've started looking at it in preventing and treating cancer. And the way that I've heard it, and I was looking for where I found this quote, but I couldn't find it. Right now, when you eat normally, your body is at work digesting pretty much 24 hours a day. It's digesting.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you too. The way that I've heard it is it's your body is digesting, and it doesn't give your body much time to heal. It does some healing, of course, but not these deep down cleanses that are really good for it. I can tell you from my own perspective, one of the things that I was found is that my own scars are disappearing. And I mean, literally, there was one day I was sitting on my recliner, I was cross-legged, and I all of a sudden realized that a scar that I've had since I was about 11 years old had flattened out and was almost invisible. Scar on my elbow, almost invisible. And these are things that I have dealt with for my whole life. It was amazing to me. It's also had an effect of tightening my skin, having the kind of loose skin problem that you would expect with someone who's lost 80 pounds. I also, for my own journey, have suffered all my life from polycystic ovary syndrome, also known as PCOS, and it creates this spectrum of symptoms. I actually diagnosed myself with this in the 1990s. I saw an article on the web and I said, yes, that's it. That's me exactly. In the 1990s, they were calling this rare. By the 2000s, when I was officially diagnosed, they were starting to realize that it's more common. And in about 2010, they started realizing that about 1 in 10 women suffer from polycystic ovary syndrome. I've also discovered, unfortunately, recently that polycystic ovary syndrome is linked to an increased risk of autism in the next generation. So the children of people with PCOS tend to have an increased risk of autism. PCOS is now typically called the metabolic syndrome or syndrome X because they discovered it affects both men and women. It is primarily the symptom of insulin resistance, and along with that, it's typically high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high triglycerides, belly fat, and increased risk of heart disease and diabetes. So polycystic ovary syndrome or metabolic syndrome is basically kind of a pre-diabetes. You know you're going to get it if nothing else changes. So what else can fasting help? And of course, fasting can help with polycystic ovary syndrome as well. It can help with other things, possibly things like anything associated with inflammation. They're looking at it for possible help with arthritis, with Crohn's, with irritable bowel syndrome, with MS, fibromyalgia, possibly even ADD. They're finding that it creates a kind of an alertness in people when they fast. And before I go much more into my own story, I wanted to talk to you about some happy fasters I've met. I told you how much I like this Facebook group. Well, I went on and asked some people who were begging if they might mind if I shared their story. And this is Donna. Both are Donna, believe it or not. She reported that she reached her goal weight, but she's still fasting because she likes the effects of autophagy. She's 5'3". She's age 55, not an age normally associated with easy weight loss. Her starting weight was 259 pounds. Now she's at, her goal was 135, but she was 134 when this picture was taken. I've become good friends with Carlo, who lost so much weight that he had to change his Bitmoji to catch up with his weight loss. He did something that I wish I had done. He took his picture wearing the same clothes month after month after month in the same basic place so that he could track his progress. One of the things that he reported to me was that his A1C, which is his blood sugar levels, changed when he started fasting from 5.9 to 5.5, where 5.5 is considered healthy and 5.6 to 6 is considered pre-diabetic. So he went from pre-diabetic to normal. His brother saw him and liked his success so much that after 5 months, he decided to start, and his A1C went from 7.9, clearly in the diabetic range, to 5.5. And then 2 of his friends saw their success. They started doing it. One of them was taking as much as 140 units, and they started doing fasting and keto and now have stopped using insulin altogether. And keto, by the way, is beyond fasting. That's going low carbohydrate and high fat. And this is Bree. I think she's the last one I have here. Bree wanted to brag that she had reached her goal of her first goal, which was in 6 months, she lost 66 pounds, which is really impressive. About 5.5 months. And she had on the left side, she took a size 26 and now she's a size 18, probably less than that by now, and down 5 sizes. So as far as my own journey is concerned, and I now realize I was going faster than I had to, so there'll be time for questions. As far as my journey is concerned, the way I started out was I did not go straight into big fasts. I was using a program called Fast 5, where I basically stopped eating breakfast and then pushed back the first meal of the day later and later and later until I finally got it to the point where my first meal was at 3 p.m. in the day. And then it was called Fast 5 because you would typically eat from 3 p.m. till 8 p.m. Now, what time you choose doesn't matter. Just restricting the window of time that you eat is the important thing. Eventually, I was really, really happy with the results that I was getting, but I decided that I wanted to pick it up a notch. So I narrowed my window even more into what some people call OMAD, or 1 meal a day, and some people call that fasting mimicking, where I would only eat from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. every day. Eventually, I wanted to speed it up even more, and I had started to plateau. So I did what was called intermittent fasting, or a 42-hour fast. So I would skip eating one day, and then the next day I would start a little bit earlier than I would have normally. And then I did one, what they call extended fast, where I fasted for 72 hours. I felt great during it. I don't know that I would repeat it too often, because literally by the end, I felt like what it must feel like to be on cocaine. I was so high energy and talking so quickly that people couldn't keep up with me, and they were saying, what the heck is she doing? And that's one of the things that happens when you go on longer fasts. But the point is that it's a gradual process. You start off just pushing your meals back, and eventually you get longer and longer as you want to see more and more results. More recently, I've been doing those 42-hour fasts twice a week. And the way that works in my world, and again, I wouldn't recommend starting with this, but typically on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I just take a vacation from eating. I don't eat it all that day. On Wednesdays and Fridays, those are what are called feast days, and I eat for 7 hours. So not even the 5 hours I used to. It's usually 2 full meals. So I'll have a lunch and I'll have a dinner, and anything I want in between. And then all of the other days of the week, I just eat 1 meal a day, my 6 to 8. This changing it out, having a different plan for one day, then another day, then another day, is what's considered the best way to keep your body from adapting. Your body really wants to say, all right, I guess this is the plan from now on. And then it just hold steady at that. So this is when I started doing this, things really took off, and I started losing weight very, very quickly. So what's happened to me? Obviously, I lost weight. I was a size 22. On the posters, I said 18, and I thought about it. I was like, yeah, at that point, I was really more like 22. Now I'm wearing a size 6. I was pre-diabetic. That's gone. I did have high blood pressure. That's gone. I don't have any more hunger issues and cravings. I used to have problems with that all the time, whether I was dieting or not. And those are no longer the case. And of course, my energy level, as I mentioned before, is through the roof. So what am I allowed during my fast? And again, you get to control this. It's your fast if you want to do it. But I only allow myself unflavored water or seltzer. I don't have lime in it, lemon, citrus, no sweetener, because I don't want my body to think that it's time to eat. I don't want my body to think that there's more coming and then start an insulin reaction, because it can do that even if you don't have something to eat. I also allow myself coffee and tea, as long as there's no sweetener and no creamer in it. You should keep in mind you are allowed cinnamon. It's actually really good for you and really good for insulin. You're allowed chia seeds, either dry or in gel, but to be honest with you, I've never tried them. I didn't feel I needed to. And those are something that you would add if you felt like you really needed some help. You're also allowed minerals such as salt and baking soda. And by the way, baking soda is really great at making a cheap cup of coffee taste much better, because I know it sounds gross, but I'm talking about just like the smallest little dab of baking soda. It reduces the acidity of the coffee, and that's what makes it taste better. So I allow myself that. And of course, most supplements and medications would be no problem while you're fasting. One big surprise to me was no chewing gum. Again, your body starts to act as though it's an insulin. So you don't want to chew gum, have the flavor of it, nor the action of eating. If you want to fast, but you really can't get there, you really need something to get you tied over, you can have lemon in your water if that helps. You can actually, I know this sounds odd, but you can use heavy whipping cream if, for example, you want it in your coffee. Just make certain it's not flavored. You can also have homemade bone broth. It's the fat in there that's going to help you satiate your need for something, and also the taste of homemade bone broth will help. And a number of people like to have apple cider vinegar while they're fasting. I choose not to, but that's another thing that's really, really great for your insulin levels. So once I do open my eating window, and that's the term that they use to describe this, what I'm allowed to eat is initially anything you want, really, anything. And you'll notice what stays there longer than other items. In a few days, you're not going to want as much. I know that a lot of people are worried if they are doing this, that when they have their next meal, they're just going to binge eat, and it's okay. In a few days of fasting, after a few days of doing like one meal a day or lowering that, you're not going to feel that you need as much. And you're not going to feel as though you're going to need those things. But the most important thing to me was not denying myself things that I really wanted. As you get more results, you might find as you restrict your window more and more and more, then the results will get faster and faster. One of the things I strongly recommend is when you do open your window, when you do decide that you want to eat, eat in this priority. Before you start with any of the carbs. So yes, you can have that donut if you want, those fries if you want, but first, eat your healthy fats. Eat your proteins, eat your veggies, eat your dairy, eat your fruits and vegetables, or I said vegetables earlier. But only after all of that should you then start having your carbs, if you have any stomach left for it. If you are struggling to make it through to the time that where you wanted to break your fast, here's some ideas of some things that could help. Not an iTunes install. Oh, by the way, I when I first started waiting till 3 o'clock to eat, I would look at my clock and I would say, okay, is it 3 yet? Is it 3 yet? Okay, it's 2:30. All right, I can do this. I can do this. I can get to I can get till 3 o'clock. An hour later, I would look at my watch again, 2:35. However, what I would say to myself is, I am delaying, not denying. I can have the food. I just am delaying the satisfaction. And I can do that. I can say, if you ask me to never eat a piece of cake again, or God forbid you ever ask me to stop eating chocolate, it's not happening. You know me well enough to know that's not happening. But if I can have it, if I just wait for a few more hours, not a problem. You need to remind yourself, even though it feels like you're starving, you're not. Just keep reminding yourself, I'm not actually starving to death. And you can say to yourself, you know that sensation, that uncomfortable feeling you're having? That's actually the sensation of losing weight. And that was another big inspiration for me. You should keep in mind that a thing called appetite control is going to kick in and make it easier after the first couple of days. And it really, it's the first couple of days that are the hardest for people. And then after that, it gets easier. But so many people have already quit by then because they didn't realize that it was going to get easier. Obviously, you're going to want to drink water to help you get past. I personally find it helpful to plan my meal. If I know what I'm going to have and I know I'm going to enjoy it, it's a whole lot easier to wait for that time to come. Go for a walk is a pretty typical example. And then the other thing I do is give myself a special treat. So on those Tuesdays and Thursdays when I don't bother eating, I give myself 2 episodes of Downton Abbey, which I never saw before, and I only let myself watch it on fast days. So if I don't fast that day, I don't get to Downton Abbey. And I actually look forward to my fast days because I get to watch Downton Abbey. And I'm up to season 3, Julia. And I'll pick a different show that I'll watch once that's over. The other thing that I tend to do a lot is I go to bed early. I go to bed early to begin with, and I go to bed ridiculously early on fast nights when I don't want to have to deal with being hungry. You don't tend to feel too hungry when you're asleep. Although I have found that I frequently have dreams that I've accidentally broken my fast. That I'm sitting there eating away and I went, oh shoot, I meant to fast today. Sometimes people say if I don't eat well, if I don't eat regularly, I don't feel well. And one of the things you want to check is, are you hydrated enough? You may actually be suffering from dehydration rather than problems from fasting. Are your electrolytes high enough? Do you need to add some more salt? Did you try too much too fast? Get it? Too fast? Sorry. But a lot of times people go from 0 to 60 and they say, I'm going to start a 24-hour fast right after Jean finishes this talk. That's probably too much, and that's going to be a problem. You might want to change your schedule around a bit, see if maybe that would help. Try a more gradual plan. However, if you feel really weak and you feel sick, you should stop fasting. Try again another time. Don't get discouraged, but try to look at what happened that made you get there. The time I gave this talk before, someone who was very thin said to me, I really like the idea of autophagy. She in particular is starting to have some memory issues and would like to try it, but she doesn't want to lose weight anymore, which is a good plan. She doesn't need to lose weight. So what the recommendation to do there, and I can't give this from personal experience, but I have done some research, that autophagy starts around 18 to 20 hours into a fast. If you were to do a 22-hour fast once in a while, that should prevent you from losing weight. And then you just need to make certain that you keep things balanced and healthy so that you make up for the meals that you missed and therefore don't lose weight. And you want to keep on experimenting until you get the balance. As far as my future is concerned, what I plan, I might consider going on that keto diet. Remember, that's the one that's very high fat and very low carb. I don't really feel I need to. I am actually now in my maintenance. I hit goal about 3 weeks ago. But if I were to go on keto, it would no longer be about losing weight. It would be about curing my insulin resistance. Because if you'll recall, my polycystic ovary syndrome, metabolic syndrome, I still have that, and I'm still struggling to get rid of it. And I know that I will eventually, but I'm still working on it. But I am on maintenance. Maintenance, when you fast, means considering fasting to be a way of life. I will no longer go back to a 3-meal-a-day plan. What I will do is go between 1 meal a day and 5-hour fast to try and just make certain I keep my weight where I am. And these are the resources that I would recommend if you're considering looking into this more. There's a book that kind of the guru of all of this fasting stuff is a fellow named Jason Fung. There are a number of other people. This guy was a kidney specialist, originally from Canada, and he started realizing that when people were fasting, it was improving their kidney function as well as weight issues. He created the Complete Guide to Fasting. The book that I started on was a free PDF called The Fast 5 Diet and the Fast 5 Lifestyle by Bert Herring. Strongly recommend it. And then another one which was inspirational for me, but only for a short time, was a book called Delay, Don't Deny, which is what gave me that whole mindset about how I can have anything I want as long as I push it off. And I mentioned before the Facebook group that I belong to, the Obesity Code Network. If anybody would like an invitation to this group, I'm happy to give it, but you can also just look them up and ask to join and see a lot more information about fasting. And there are millions of YouTube videos if you were to look up intermittent fasting about this. So I am interested if anybody would like to join a support group to do this. I would welcome you to do that. We used to have Weight Watchers years years ago and they didn't have enough people to keep going. But fortunately for this, the support group is free as compared to what we used to do here. Fasting is free. In fact, it is negative cost because you buy less food. So if you are interested in doing this, I'm going to be holding a meeting on Friday, a week from today at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And you are welcome to join. And the first topic is going to be getting started. So that concludes my talk. I would like to welcome anyone who would like to ask questions.
Curious what you tried before.
I have tried just about everything, including, but not limited to, Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, biking and gym, of course. Shoot, what's one of those where they send you the food? I don't remember, but a million things. I took out all the foods that I was allergic to at one point and left myself basically eating eggs and peanut butter, just about everything. And this is the most excited I've ever been because this feels sustainable. What was so disheartening to me about things like Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and all of those others is that it never felt sustainable. I never felt like I could eat that way from now on. But knowing that I never have to stop eating something that I really like is what makes it feel like this could work. And one of the things, by the way, that I regularly will do is in the past, if someone would have brought, say, donuts to work on a Friday, I would sit there and look at those donuts and I would resent the donuts and I would resent the person who brought them into the office. Now what I do is I take my donut, I put it in a Ziploc bag, I put it somewhere where I don't have to look at it all day, and when my window opens, I get my donut. That's my reward for having waited.
So I'm really glad that you're on maintenance now, because as you know, my concern was that you get excited and not stop. How are you making sure that you stay on maintenance? How do you, do you weigh yourself once a week or something like that? Put on a pair of pants? Contrary
to what most people say don't weigh yourself every day. I do weigh myself every day, and I consider whatever weight I am to be average. So I weigh myself every day, but I don't panic when it goes up. My scale is wonky. It goes up like pounds at a time. It doesn't matter. So I just try to make sure that that stays within my range. And to be honest, I went a little bit past my goal to give myself some running room, just a little, like 3-4 pounds. But now I don't have to worry if I go a little bit above. I know I'm going to correct.
So when you eat that donut that you put in the Ziploc bag at that time, 3 o'clock time, do you eat anything else?
Oh, yes. In fact, that's a great question. In case you couldn't hear, the question was, do I eat anything else besides that donut? And remember, my priorities are always going to be the healthy fats first, and then proteins, and then the rest. And then if I still want, I can have that donut. When you do a 42-hour fast, as I'm doing right now, when I open my window, I do it a very particular way because you don't want to start into foods that are going to make you sick, which can happen if you eat foods that aren't as good in that opening stage. You can start feeling nauseous. So what I do is I always open with a high fat. So it's either going to be a handful of nuts or an avocado, and then I wait about 30 minutes, and then I can have my regular meal. But what you do is for every meal that you skip, you basically replace it with another meal. So instead of eating the meal that I would have had on Thursday night, I eat 2 meals in a row on Friday to make up for that. Other questions?
Hi, Jean. It's Christina Ratney. How are you?
Hi, Christina. Very well. How are you?
So I'm good. Thank you so much for taking your time and going over this because I've been checking out fasting for a while. So you really did break it down in layman terms. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
My question for you is in regards to like I'm on tons of meds and vitamins that when I do take it on an empty stomach, I tend to get nauseous. So what do you recommend doing in those cases? I mean, I can't wait obviously until I open my window up, but is there anything that,
That's actually a really good question, and I would need to investigate this some more, but I would imagine that would be a great place to have it with some of those high-fat foods like the heavy whipping cream and the bone broth.
okay.
I think that those would be the good substitute if you really want to fast, but you also want to give it something to work on.
Cool. And I also heard that there is a some kind of sweetener that they sell that it's okay to put
I
in your.
heard that as well, and I don't remember what it's called. I haven't tried it, but for me, I'm very, very protective of my fast, and I
Yeah.
was too worried to try that. In fact, I am so protective of my fast. I know this sounds a little OCD, but I don't use toothpaste on days that I'm fasting. I instead use baking soda as toothpaste. So I just do not want to give my body any signals that it's time to eat when it's not.
And how soon did you notice the difference when you started energy levels?
On my energy levels, I would say probably about a week and a half in. So just at the point where it started getting easy, I started noticing a couple of things. One being the energy levels, another being a different kind of attention. So Matt is going to make fun of me because he knows how forgetful I can be. But when I started fasting, I noticed I was able to keep track of more things at once. So fewer things would slip through the cracks. And that also started, I would say maybe a month in, but it may be that it started when I went into the 6 to 8 period, the 1 meal a day, that I really started noticing the cognitive differences. And the weight loss started off, gradual as you would assume. And then every time I started changing my eating plan, it would just have this burst. In fact, one of the things they talk about is something called a whoosh, where I wouldn't lose weight for 2-3 weeks. I would notice it in my clothes, but no change on the scale. And all of a sudden the scale would go down like 7 or 8 pounds in like one day. It was crazy, but it was actual weight loss because it wouldn't come back. Thanks. Other questions?
You
Yes,
have
sir.
a family. For them, how did this impact your family life?
That's actually a really good question. My family started intermittent fasting. Not because I forced them to, but my husband has been, getting those love handles that you get as you get older, and he decided he wanted to try and support me a little bit. So he has been going almost entirely 3 to 8 p.m. eating windows for the past 3 months, and he's lost 21 pounds. My youngest has a choice of either eating with us in our 1 meal a day or making themselves food. I have nothing to do with it. Fortunately for me, my youngest is 23, and even though they pretend as though they can't cook, can't boil water, they can. And they learn how to when I tell them, no, I'm not helping you with dinner today because I don't want to have to cook somebody else's food when I'm fasting.
This is Nadia.
Hi, Nadia.
Good job. Thank you so much. So informative. So, when you so after you saying that after you started, you said that you now kind of tricking your body, right? So you changing your windows or your times when you eat. But
Yes.
what will happen if you don't? What will happen if you will just continue with, say, window 3 to 8 every day?
That's a very good point. So typically that's considered maintenance. When you go like 3 to 8 every day would be maintenance. And I'm probably going to start going to that. What I'll do is I will eat 3 to 8, And then if I start noticing I'm a few pounds, I may go to a 6 to 8 for a few days, or I may do a 42-hour fast, just so that I correct myself. So I'm imagining that this is going to be a constantly self-correcting thing where I'm going to eat all day this day, 2 hours this day, no hours this day, and then change it until I make sure that my weight's where I want it to be.
I really love this tip and great idea to eat carbs last if you still have room in the stomach. That's fabulous idea to kind of, even if you don't fast, just to adopt it for myself. You said you start with healthy fat and then you go to veggies and fruits, right? And then
No proteins after the
carb.
fats. So fats, then proteins, then kind of everything else. Often the fats and proteins are together. So I might have meat where the fats and proteins are together, but then you can start on the other things. And
Sounds a little bit like you're doing mostly like fats and protein.
It is related. It is related in that instance, in the healthy fats part and the low carb, it is related. And I always am going to have a taste of dessert. Even if I'm too full, I'm going to at least taste dessert. And I have to tell you, and those of you who sit near me know that this is a fact, I will never go, yep, Peter's saying, I can attest, I will almost never go a day without eating chocolate. On total fast days, yes, but other days I am going to have my chocolate. Peter's showing me the chocolate he's about to give me. I am not going to give up my chocolate, and I still am going to keep the weight down with that.
Jean, sorry, go ahead.
You don't eat your chocolates on the days when you don't eat at all, right? You said
Correct.
Tuesday, Thursday, you just don't take it, right?
You got it.
How many calories do you eat each day?
I don't count.
Okay.
The thing that I aim for is the meal that I eat is going to be a really good meal, but I don't bother counting calories.
But at an average of a meal a day, it's got to be
About
under 2
somewhere around 600 probably.
600 a day? Are you back to biking?
No. Well, sometimes. That's for my OMAD days. Of course, on the days when I'm eating 2 meals, it's probably more like 1,000. Anything else?
So when you're doing your shopping, for whatever, do you look at the chart and start, oh, this will be good because it has this amount of.
I don't really. I have kind of my old standbys, especially the fats that I want to start with, and then everything else I'm going to have chicken. I'm going to have veggies. One of the things, just as a little pitch here, there's a food service called Dinnerly. It's sort of like Blue Apron and some of those other food delivery services that you might be aware of. What I love is that I barely shop for me. I buy a couple of staples: flour, oil, eggs, and then the rest I get these Dinnerlies. I get 3 a week, and I don't eat in between my community meals and the Dinnerlies. I'm done. I spend $50 a week shopping, on these Dinnerlies, and then it's it. And we've been saving a ton of money because we're not buying much food. So it's kind of the opposite in my opinion, of all of these diet services where the whole point is for you to spend money. This is the opposite. All right, then I am going to let you go. If you have questions that you either didn't want to say in front of other people or that you think of later, by all means, feel free to contact me. I will be making the video of this available, and I will be making the PowerPoint of this available. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Thank you.